Can a Christian be a Democrat? Now, before we unpack this religious rhetoric, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Now, this question was asked apologist Frank Turek. Now, if you don't know who Frank Turek is, he's a well-known Christian apologist. Now, apologists are trained thinkers to defend the faith. The closest thing I can relate to would be a formal debate, those who participate in formal debate. Apologists are trained to defend the Christian faith, so they are thinkers and they can not only give a defense of their faith, but they are also can challenge their opponents. Frank Turek is well known for his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, in which he again makes an apologetic defense. Now, I knew a lot of his apologetics and used to watch and enjoy them. What I didn't know about Frank Turek was he was very close friends with the late Charlie Kirk. In fact, he was present the day of his passing. Now, the reason I bring that up is because, like many white evangelicals, they've sort of come out of the closet in favor of their white defense, their whiteness, their white culture, their pride of being white, which is the same as what you find in white conservatives. You hear it on Fox News every day. Well, a lot of white Christians aligned with that ideology. So what you find is they're tired of talking about racism. And so they try to dismiss the reality, the truth, the history of racism. And not only that, but they now try to flip the script. White people are not racist. It's black people who are the racists. Black people are the ones that's continuing the problem. All of that racist stuff was hundreds of years in the past. We've moved on. They're lying, but this is what they teach. Of course, what's surprising, of course, is when Christians, those who claim to have biblical values, they claim the higher moral platform of the Bible, and yet they're no different than their secular counterparts. And so people like Charlie Kirk exploited that the same as when Nixon's Southern strategy, when after the passage of the 64-65 Civil Rights Act, one that Charlie Kirk said was horrible, the Southern strategy reached out to those disgruntled whites who were mad, white people who were mad of this passage of taking segregation away and making blacks equal. They no longer would openly say the N-word, and they took off their Klan sheets, and they would use more careful language. We called it coded language. Now, Charlie Kirk exploited that. For example, Charlie Kirk said that the Civil Rights Act was horrible. Or, I'm sorry, he said Martin Luther King was a horrible person. The Civil Rights Act was bad for America. He said if he stepped on a airplane, and saw a black pilot, he would wonder if he was qualified. And of course, he said many other things, which I'm not going to get into because Charlie Kirk himself is not the center of it. The reason I brought that up, make those points, was Frank Turek's close friendship with Charlie Kirk. And then, of course, statements that he has recently said, which he might say in this video, shows that he thinks like Charlie Kirk. In other words, he's in perfect agreement, perfect alignment. Now, when the question is asked, can a Christian be a Democrat? Immediately, Frank Turek should say that's not an issue of salvation. In other words, Jesus did not make as a criteria whether you were a Republican or a Democrat as as an essential to salvation. So why do some people make the issue? Now, the person who's asking the question, I don't know what his background is. You're going to see this is an audience, and I don't know what exactly the audience is. I don't know if it's a college campus or a church or whatever. But clearly, this is something that, again, you find among conservatives, white evangelical conservatives, and all of this equals white nationalism. And white nationalism is just racist white people with a white narrative. In other words, they want a white America, white communities, and white churches. And so Charlie Kirk exploited that. Even if he wanted to say that he wasn't a racist, he certainly exploited that because, again, he had a great platform because of it. Frank Turek was his close friend. And so therefore, he's closely aligned with a lot of that rhetoric. So let's get into the video. I'm going to unpack the video, and now what I'm going to do is I'll unpack it as we go. The video is about 6 minutes long. Here is the title of the video: Can you be a Christian Democrat? Now we're going to deal with his points that he's going to make. Okay. So, and let me also say this, that he's a popular video. YouTube may interrupt with ads. If they do, we will scroll through them as fast as we can. So here we go.
My question is, can you truly be a Christian and support the ideologies of the left wing of America?
So he's going to bring up some of those ideologies. I'm going to tell you right now the answer should be this is not a Christian issue. And I'll explain why the hypocrisy from Republicans, from conservative Christians, right off the bat is that they believe the same ideologies. So, for example, they're going to tell you that abortion is bad. How can you be a Christian and support murder? Well, then how can you be a Republican and how can you be a Christian and support the Republican platform? They believe in abortion in case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. But let's go on. Let's continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think we're about out of time.
I'm not trying to be divisive here.
There are certainly some things that Christians can disagree over politically. And it's true that no party has everything right. Okay? We can agree on that, right?
Yes.
When Jesus was going after the politicians, who were the politicians of his day? The Pharisees. Some of them were on the Sanhedrin. In Matthew 23:23, he says to them.
Now, let me stop because here is, to me, the false fallacy. When he brings up the Pharisees, now he's correct. There were two main groups of the Sanhedrin. There were a couple others, but there were two main groups of the Sanhedrin. One was the Sadducees and the other was the Pharisees. The reality is that the Pharisees would be more aligned with the conservatives today. Why? The Pharisees were the more religious. In other words, they adhered to the law of Moses. They boasted in obeying the law of Moses, the precepts, the commandments, and the traditions of the law of Moses. They were the more conservative of the group. And so when you look at today, and one reason why that Jesus blasted them, he's getting ready to cite out of Matthew 23, is because they do know the law and yet they violate it. The same as Christian conservatives today. Now, the Sadducees would be more of the progressive, the liberals, the left, right? While the or the Democrats, right? They were the largest of the group, but yet they had some strange beliefs. They believed in the law of Moses, but didn't believe in angels. They believed in the law of Moses, but didn't believe in the resurrections. And, what law were they reading? So they would be more of a liberal side. So while he is using the Pharisees to try to paint the Democrats wouldn't align a lot of their ideologies with the Pharisees. However, the Christian right, the conservative Christian movement, the Christian nationalists, they would. So this passage would be more talking to people like Frank Turek when they would be the leftist right.
You've neglected the more important matters of the law. You're tithing your spices, but you're neglecting the more important matters of the law, justice and faithfulness. You should have practiced the former without neglecting the latter. In other words, you should have tithed your spices, but you shouldn't have neglected the big things. What is the first right all of us have as human beings? The right to life. The right.
So let's stop for a moment now. He's getting ready to bring in abortion, right? All right, and as I just said, Republicans, conservatives support abortions in case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Are those babies okay to unalive? Secondly, think about what our president just did, who bombed boats, Venezuelan boats, right? Is that okay? He's talking about the right to live. But remember, and acknowledge that he's focusing on abortions, killing babies in the womb. All right.
Life is the right to all other rights. If you don't have life, you don't have anything. So any political party that does not support the right to life, at least better than the other political party.
Stop. That's manipulation now. That's moving the goalpost. Notice he said this. Better than. Well, wait a minute. Life is life. So how are you going to now say, well, this party has this much abortion and the other party has this much, we should go with that one? Where does scripture tell you to choose the lesser of the two evils?
Or let me put it another way. If one party completely neglects the right to life for the unborn, and the other party tries to protect, even though not completely, the right to life for the unborn, if you're not neglecting the more important matters of the law, who are you going to have to support?
Well, who told you to support either one? In other words, the party he's referring to is compromising on the value of life. In other words, in case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother, who says those babies? Did God says those babies were okay to abort? And then because they don't make up the majority of it, the grass numbers that he's getting ready to say, that the left supports, the Democrat supports, they're the more evil, so therefore we should go with them. Where did God tell you to do that? Where did God tell you to make that distinction? Where?
You're going to have to support the party that wants to save as many babies as possible. Okay?
Why can't you just say, both of y'all, none of y'all are wrong. As Christians, as people of God, why can't you take a stand and say, all of it is wrong, we're not going to support neither one?
I don't understand how Christians who know the Bible and know the platforms of both parties support the Democrats anymore. I do not understand it.
I don't understand how, as a Christian, you can support either party, but what you're trying to align yourself with, I don't understand how you could be a Republican and support a lot of the policies of the Republican, as if God is the one that's making this choice. If it's God, that the Republicans are on God's side. Let me just make this statement right here. Politics, both sides are the opposite sides of the same evil coin. You're aligning with the evil of politics, not the Bible and not morality.
Please explain it to me. Because we've gone from merely allowing abortion in the Democratic platform to now paying for it, all the way up to the moment of birth. How does anybody support this?
I don't know how true that is. And it's certainly, I'm going to say it's not the norm. And I'm certainly going to be careful here because I'm not defending either side. My criticism is more for the people who claim to have the biblical superiority. Okay? Both are wrong. How can you support any amount of abortion or in any case of abortion?
You say, oh, well, Trump has nasty tweets. Yeah, he does. Trump's a narcissist. Okay. I get it. But when you weigh everything out, as much as you might have to hold your nose to vote a certain way, you realize that there is no way I can support the butchery or the mutilation of the genitalia of children.
Well, it's not a straw man argument. It's using the argument. Trump supports abortion in case of rape, case of rape, incest, in the life of the mother. So again, I ask the question: are those babies okay to be aborted?
Which is another issue that shouldn't be a debate among Christians. How can you support that? You know, Charlie and I did a event at a church in Tucson just before the election. And, you know, politics are messy. You don't get everything you want. You just don't, right? And at one point, I had a question, and I said, look, I understand you don't like President Trump. I get that, okay? He's not my favorite personality either, all right? But you need to remember that when you're voting for president, you're not voting for one person. You're voting for 5,000 people to go to Washington and implement an agenda, implement a platform. And you need to look at that agenda. You need to look at that platform and say, which is the closest to Christian values?
So let me again, that's a fallacy. And by the way, this is why the Christian right jumped into the political arena back in the 50s and 60s. The misguided notion, and to say, let's choose a platform. Now, who is closest to our platform? I'm going to say, how are either parties closer to biblical values? And let me also remind you that you go back to the 50s, what was behind a lot of the Christian right was racism, the support of segregation. Okay? So when you say that we're going to now fight to save aborted babies, here's the clapback. You're not even fighting to save babies that are alive. You're not fighting to save children. But I digress.
Are you going to get everything? No. But are you going to get the most important things? By the way, what is the number one responsibility of government? To protect innocent people from evil. That's what Romans 13 is all about. Protect innocent people from evil. If you're not doing that, you're an illegitimate government. And what did the Biden administration do? They opened the borders. And they allowed sex traffickers. You know we have 300,000 missing girls in America who we...
Well, this building, I don't know when this tape was made, okay? I don't know when this tape was made. I'm gonna assume, because the date on it is it's posted a day ago, 2 days ago, something like that. I don't know when the actual tape was made. And I think it was certainly made within the last, 3 months, okay? But again, you're giving the wrong information to fit your narrative. So most of the people that came across the border were looking for a better life. Now, did the Biden administration, I think, mishandle and let it get out of hand? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you remember Trump planted the seeds of immigration back when he ran in 2016, when he said Mexico is sending their worst, right? And I guess it also meant South America sending their worst. And so if you are going to sit up and demonize a group of people, okay, if you're going to demonize a group of people, and this is always funny to me, so immigration isn't a problem because Trump brought in South Africans. He brought in South Africans, paid, full and paid. Those immigrants were okay. He actually went out and got them, paid for them to come in. So when you get into this argument right here, and you want to bring in the Bible to say who's just, well then be biblical. You're not being just. You're being very, very one-sided. Very, very one-sided. Okay, let's go.
Are now sex trafficked. You know, I was talking to a guy.
I think they're claiming I may be wrong on this. I think, aren't they claiming they found some of these women? And by the way, again, you're being disingenuous because the majority of the people who are sex trafficked are not by illegal criminals. So who is the majority of the people that is being sex trafficked, being kidnapped, taken away? It's not illegal because by now, hasn't Trump put a significant dent in the immigration problem? So who are you talking about right now?
That works in the National Security Division or for the National Security Advisor, which is Marco Rubio, and this is unclassified, so I met this guy standing under Air Force 2 a couple of weeks ago when J.D. Vance came to take Charlie's body back to Phoenix. And we got talking, and I said, what's keeping you up at night? He said that there are cells all over America that are trying to coordinate an attack in major cities, and the terrorists are going to disguise themselves as paramedics or as police officers. This is unclassified. Why are they in the country? Thank you, Joe Biden. If you're not protecting innocent people from evil, you're not.
Well, first of all, Joe Biden, what he's talking about, Joe Biden has been out of office at the point of this a year. And as I said, hasn't Trump made a significant dent in deporting illegal criminals? Isn't what this claim to fame is? See, this is rhetoric that he's exploiting, that he's kind of feeding the narrative in people. Trump's been president for over a year, and he's talking about Biden. Why don't you tell us what Trump is doing right now? Why don't you give us the result of what Trump is doing?
In your job. And so, do I like everything about the Republican Party? No. In fact, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Christian.
Yeah, amen.
And if 20...
First of all, they all say that. I'm not a Republican. Actually, you can say I'm an independent. But you talk like a Republican, you vote like a Republican, so.
From now, the Democrats have a better platform than the Republicans, I'm voting Democrat. I don't care what the label is.
Actually, he won't. I refute that wholeheartedly. He absolutely won't.
I'm looking to protect innocent people from evil. That's the role of government. But when the government starts doing evil, sorry, you guys over here are the Democrats because you're on my left. I'm sorry, okay? When the government starts doing evil, that's when you need to say, I cannot support this at all. I got to find an alternative.
All right, so he says when the government starts doing evil. Really? You mean to tell me that in your lifetime, Republicans haven't done evil? We could go on and on. Here's the problem with this whole thing here. His whole argument is to assume that God is a Republican, to assume that the conservative movement, the Republicans, have the most biblical values, and they absolutely don't. And to demonize one group as if they're the demons, but we're the good guys, when if you measure each party by the biblical values, you find they're one and the same. All right, guys, that's my perspective. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you next time.